Are we transmitting as well? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's now 6:30. Yes. Anyway, I'm Councillor Martin Round, the Chairman of the Economic Regeneration and Leisure Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting of the committee. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings? No, I thank you. I ask so that people at the meeting will know if this will be happening. If the fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please remain seated and members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. So I go on to the agenda. First and foremost, apologies for absence. I have received apologies from Councillor Cox. I've also received apologies for lateness, potentially from Councillor Forecast. Notification of substitute members. Your hand is up, Councillor Webb.
Councillor Webb, substitute for Councillor Cox.
Thank you. Urgent items, there are none as far as I know. Notification of visiting members. I see we have one. Councillor English, would you like to tell us your particular interests, please?
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm just here to watch mostly, but I will make a few brief remarks on item 16, application for a historic plaque at Wren's Cross.
Thank you very much. Right, item 5. Any disclosures by members or officers, please? No. Item 6, disclosures of lobbying. I will stick my hand up first and say I have been lobbied on a couple of items, mainly about plaques, but also concerning agenda item 17. No other lobbying? No? Right, item 7. I move that the items on the agenda be taken in public as proposed. Is that acceptable? Thank you. Over to the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 14th of September 2021. I've had a quick scan. I haven't had any problems with those minutes. I find them acceptable. Anybody else have any other comments? Councillor Nagy.
Thank you, Chairman. Page 5, number 50, appointment, the Twinning Association. We did have a discussion maybe about putting discussing at some time or other at this committee the Twinning Association itself. Do you remember? We did say we might be able to do something. Not in this year, maybe some other time, but we did I think we all agreed that we should mention that at some time.
I remember the discussion and I remember saying, yes, at some point of time, we will need to discuss twinning. But I did say, if I remember rightly, that it's not for this current work programme. And as and when we have a new committee in May, then perhaps that's something that will be remembered, and I'm sure some of us on this committee will hopefully be on that committee, and we will remember to make sure that twinning is put on that work programme. But at this stage, I don't think we really have enough time, and we have an enormous amount of things to consider and many new issues to consider in the current work programme. But don't forget it. Keep it there at the back of your mind, David. Thank you for that. I don't think there's any need to address the minutes in those circumstances, though. Right, we have no petitions to the best of my knowledge, and that has been confirmed. Question and answers session for members of the public. We have none? No, we have none. Questions from members to the chairman. Again, we don't have any official. By all means, Councillor Hull.
Yeah, it's just I wondered why all the screens have gone down, given the dramatic rise over the last few days in COVID. Seems a bit rather bad timing, in my view, when there's talks that we might have to take further measures during the winter as the situation is deteriorating.
I'm not denying that we're all in a state of, we're still living in a world of unknowns in many, many respects. I'm not denying that. But at the moment, I have to say as chair, and I did comment with our Democratic Services Office and say, I can actually see you guys on that side this time. I found it really difficult personally. I can see people on that side because I'm looking at 45 degrees to them. But on this side, I'm virtually looking at 180 degrees. And I found every different screen just gave me so much glare, I could hardly see you, even if you were waving your hand or sticking up anything. So, and in fairness, you are at least, everybody's at least a yard apart. Does the Chief Executive wish to comment?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, of course. So we regularly repeat and review our risk assessments, including for the ways in which we use the town hall. I do understand your anxiety about the direction of travel at the moment, and so if it should become necessary again, then I'm sure we will look at it again. As the chair has said, the social distancing arrangements are still in place. Though I do notice this evening that we haven't got the windows wide open, which well, one of them's open. Okay. Of course, just to reassure you, Councillor Harper, we will keep it under review.
I don't know, I assume everybody got the ping the other week about, and we traced it back, it was a councillor at a council meeting had come down with COVID and we all got contacted.
Thank you very much for that. I mean, I'm sure, as the Chief Executive said, that we are keeping a very watchful eye on the situation, and we will be taking necessary precautions. I mean, the last 20 odd months has proved that our officer team is very well adept to adapting in the circumstances and taking government recommendations. So whatever happens is thrown at us, I'm fairly sure we will be prepared. Certainly.
I'd just like to commend the Chief Executive and their staff throughout this very difficult period over the COVID rules, and I must say I welcome the screens not being in, and I think if councillors wanted to, they could always put their masks on.
Yes, as certain councillors have already reminded me they've actually got their masks with them just in case. So, yes, we can all take our own precautions. Anyway, we'll now go on to the next issue on the agenda, and that is item 12, the committee work programme on pages 6 and 7.
I do apologise, I thought I had pressed it. And my eagle eye for spelling, carriage is I-A-G-E, not A-I-G-E.
I mean, if nobody else wanted to raise any issues, I have discussed. Okay, carry on. Paul Harper first.
Yeah, no, it's only I was looking at some of those to be confirmed things towards the end, and obviously, presumably we've got the report tonight about the opening hours of the museum is on the agenda, but then it's the three below, reopening the town centre arts and cultural activities, 4-month review of the skills and community app. Well, obviously that can't happen until it's up and running. And then there's the pump track development, and I just wondered if we could try to work to bring those reports up, say, to the February meeting, if not before. I'm just conscious in terms of the pump track. I think that was something Brian Clark asked for almost the beginning of this council year. It was quite a long time ago he asked for that. So I just wanted to say if we could have those perhaps in February, gives officers plenty of time to get a couple of reports written.
I am aware that Mike Evans has actually got the officer responsible for that. In fairness, does have a considerable agenda of his own at the moment. We have been working quite extensively at looking at a variety of issues in terms of the sports and leisure field that he's involved in. I'm sure if he could put it forward, he would, but I really think that's quite optimistic, to be perfectly honest, bringing it forward any further than it is. Sorry to say that. But then on the other hand, you are right. Some of the issues may be relevant to what we're discussing tonight. And in so doing, I had a meeting with museum staff last week and John Foster and a number of other members of the teams. And subject to the debate tonight, we may come up with a number of recommendations potentially. But I'm also going to ask Democratic Services to add another couple of items to that work programme with no strict definition at the moment of timing. But one is the actual economic development programme that we actually have. I mean, you're probably aware that the economic development team consists of several individuals, of which there are many projects and many partnerships that they're involved in. It's quite a daunting area for people to understand the actual role of economic development. So I'm going to ask economic development to actually tell us how some of their partnerships and how some of their projects work at some point of time. Initially, it will probably be a reporting of what they do and how they do it. At this stage, whether there are in fact any recommendations is another matter, but there's some work to be done on that subject. So we look forward to something from the economic development team in that respect. And then again, I've discussed with Victoria in the museums, absolutely fascinated by the fact that we do have a very active education and arts programme that takes place in the museum. And I think that's another important aspect in view of the fact that their potential long-term longevity is potentially threatened as well. I think it's a subject that we need to think about and consider. So that again will go on the work programme, subject to John Foster and Victoria's work on that matter. Does anybody have any comments on those fronts? David Nagy?
I was just going to bring up something else once that's finished. Yeah? I was just going to ask, actually, because I couldn't make the Riverside Light Walk. I was wondering if someone could just mention if that was a good meeting or not.
Well, on the basis of the fact there will be a report coming up in December from Alexa, I have to say that we had quite a substantial walk around the river, and indeed inside Lock Meadow as well, at which Councillor Cannon was involved, Councillor Harper was involved, and I think we had I stand to be corrected, perhaps Councillor Harper or Councillor Cannon would like to add, but I think we had quite a stimulating and interesting debate and quite an extensive walk round, at which time we attracted the attention of many other people whilst we were doing it, which included the fire and emergency services and a number of people, both members of the public and the boating fraternity from the river. So perhaps Councillor Harper might like to add something.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was very, very good and very, I'm going to use the word illuminating. It was a bit of a pun when we talk about a light walk. But, yeah, lots of ideas came out, which I know, you know, Martin and Alexa will be bringing us up to the next meeting as to ideas to take forward. And I think one of the things I was pleasantly surprised by was the state the new food court's got to. I mean, it's virtually finished now, and the space when you go in is much larger than, you know, I think you would have got from looking at all the plans. So a real wow factor will be there, and I think Alexa just said it's due to open in November, is it? Yeah, very soon now. And the terrace, if you remember, we're putting a terrace out the back of Loch Meadow. That's in the process of being constructed. So works there are going really quickly. And I think if we can get a light walk of some description, meeting the needs of all the different communities in the area, then there's a lot of, you know, more positives to go forward there. And, you know, we can make a real difference, I think, with Loch Meadow.
Councillor Cannon, anything to add?
Not particularly, other than I was also very impressed with the state of the Loch Meadow where it's at the moment. It looks like it's been a very well planned set up, and you get the sense that, you know, I've seen similar things in London, and I think it could be quite exciting going forward. So that's good to see. And yeah, but nothing else to add really. I think wait for the report.
I think one thing that was very distinctive when I certainly went into the Loch Meadow is it changes the entrance area completely. It makes it, the minute you walk in up those steps, you feel as if you're in a dynamic area. Before, you just felt you were in a corridor with things at the side. But when you walk in now, it's just this massive open space of lots of potentially different things going on. Well, lots of different foods being offered. So it makes it a lot more dynamic. And what I would consider to be like the American food miles are in America, or some of the big cities have, that you might find in the Birminghams and Nottinghams and Manchesters of this world. So it actually is quite an exciting development. And as for the river itself, we did have quite a lot of discussions. Basically, we're all agreed that when you stand in Loch Meadow and look across the river, that has to be Maidstone's best view. But we need to make it look good, because it's not looking as good as it could at the moment. So, anyway, no other work programme issues? No? Okay. Okay, item 13, there are no reports from outside bodies. So, item 14. I hand you over to Ellie Dunnett to present our quarter financial update.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. So this is the first quarter finance and performance update. I'll start with the finance section, which is attached to Appendix 1. So the outturn information in the report looks back at the period up to the end of June. So it is historic now that we're a couple of weeks past the end of the second quarter. So starting with the position on the revenue account, which is more or less on track for this committee, we're forecasting an underspend of 19,000 at this stage for this financial year, and there are no significant variances to report on. Looking at the position for accounts as a whole, at the end of quarter one, we were forecasting an underspend of 144,000 for the end of the year. On the capital side, 543,000 was spent in the first quarter against an approved budget of 4.5 million. And the most significant area of spend in the first quarter was on the bus station refurbishment. We are anticipating capital slippage of 1.9 million at this stage, and that mainly relates to the construction project at Moat Park Visitor Centre and Estate Services Building. That project is underway and it's expected to complete in 2022. So moving on to the performance appendix, which is Appendix 2 to the report. This is the first of the new reports monitoring the Council's recovery from the pandemic. The data provided is to give an insight into how the Council is recovering, with this committee focusing particularly on the economy. So of the two targeted indicators, neither of them actually hit their target in quarter one. The footfall in the town centre indicator missed its target within 10%, and that was despite seeing the highest footfall in the town centre since pre-pandemic times. As the public's confidence improves, the economic development team have said that they would expect to see footfall numbers increase. The second indicator to miss its target is tracking the number of unemployed 18 to 24-year-olds. This target has been determined using the average monthly unemployed youth from a pre-pandemic year. The numbers have been decreasing slowly each month since April 21, and the early Q2 figures confirm that they are still falling. The percentage of all unemployed residents has also continued to fall since its peak in 2020. You will also see from the report that we've been monitoring house prices in Maidstone, which have risen significantly this year compared to the same period last year. So across all properties, house prices have increased by an average of 10.2%. I'll leave it there for the introduction, but very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, I really like, I know some people don't like tables and finance and figures, but I love them. I really like this report. I mean, I don't necessarily like everything in it, but I like the report. And it's really positive news. One particular thing stuck right out in front of me. Our footfall's nearly back to where it was. And I think that is a highly important factor. And that, again, restores confidence and the ability to trade in just about every single facet we've got. So not only are we getting our economy back and our busy business back, but hopefully it'll be enough to stimulate even more in the future. So that really was a lovely figure to see that. I'll leave it open to the floor for further comments. I see Councillor Harper wishes to comment.
Yeah, I've got one question and a couple of points to make. So, looking at the narrative on page 18, you referred to the fact that in the third paragraph, we're shortly going to apply for the final round of funding of the government's sales fees and charges compensation scheme, presumably both for the leisure centre and the museum, because I see it's referred to in the museum. And then when I looked at the table on page 20, they both seem to be on forecast to achieve their budget at year end. So is that after? Are you assuming the money from this compensation thing in arriving at being on target at year end, or are we going to be on target at year end and the money from the compensation thing will be on top? Because it's not at all clear as to which way around I should be reading the figures. Either we don't need the money because we all seem to be on target, or we're not quite on target and that's why we need the money to get us back to target. So that's the first question.
Yeah, I'll take that. So the scheme is measuring losses against last year's income budgets, so the 2021 income budgets. In some areas, we have adjusted those income budgets as part of 21-22 budget setting. So whilst you might not see an in-year variance, we are still potentially down on the position that we were in last year. So that's where we will have an ongoing claim. I don't think it's likely to be significant for many of the areas in this committee, but that's something we'll be submitting this week. It's likely to be in the region of about 0.4 million for the council as a whole. So yeah, it is still a worthwhile scheme.
Okay, so it's comparing, the claim is based on last year's budgets, which I know the income figures were higher, and we lowered them, I think, when we agreed the budget for this year in light of that. Okay. My next question was on the capital. Looking on page 22, where we're talking about the Moat Park Lake Dam works, and it's saying that all work seemed to be finished apart from a sluice gate. Yet when I was looking at the amount of slippage on that, and it seems to be just shy of £500,000. I was just wondering how much a sluice gate is going to cost. You might not have, I doubt you've got the answer to that. I mean, it's possibly a rhetorical question, but £500,000 for sluice gate to me seemed quite a lot of money. Whether we may have an underspend overall on that, which could be returned into the coffers for something else. Unless you do know the answer.
I can come back to you with more information on that, if that would be helpful. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, and just finally, I'd just like to, again, as the Chair said, there's a lot of positives in terms of the sort of COVID KPIs. Unemployment's falling down. Unemployment's going down rather. It's still obviously high, but compared to last year, it's dropped by about 20%. And footfall in the town centre is moving in the right direction. The one thing in terms of house prices, which sort of stuck out to me looking at that, was obviously flats and maisonettes, clearly had dropped in the last month. I think that might be one for us to monitor, because obviously with the pandemic, I know that a lot of people have been looking to have houses and more space, and I'm just wondering whether we may see a trend with flattening prices for flats and maisonettes. Just thinking in terms of future development in the town, if the demand is potentially plateauing for that type of accommodation, we just want to be cognizant that, in the wider scheme of property we get involved with. But it did strike me as that, whether that is a start of a trend. It may not be, but yeah, worth watching.
I can assure you, Councillor Harper, that it has been noticed, and that's why those of us in chair and vice chair positions at the moment are having regular discussions on how we're managing housing. And of course it has been well said and noted at the previous council meeting that our leader has actually said we intend to look at, we don't have the answers, we don't have the solutions, we don't know quite how we're doing it, but housing's a key issue to us. Councillor Webb.
Yes, I've just got two questions. Could you take me through the, on page 20, and give me a verbal understanding where it says museum, and this isn't because you're here, Victoria, it's just a finance one. I chose this because this was the worst variance. Museum starts off with £19,000 in the budget for the year. Then we lose £40,000 in the first quarter. So it goes down by 21. It goes down by... you explain it, because I think I might have got it wrong. Sorry.
So if you're looking at column C, that's what we call the profiled budget, so the budget that we have just for the first 3 months of the year. That would recognise that in those first 3 months of the year, presumably we were having kind of a large income receipt, probably a grant of some sort. So it is netted down and summarised for the purposes of this report. So that's obviously you see in column B, the position for the whole year. If you take just the first 3 months of the year, which is the focus of this report, that's where you can, that's the kind of impact of that grant. Is it the ACE grant?
Thank you, that's very clear. Moving on, I think that the performance ratings, I don't think we can read an awful lot into those because it's just coming, this is just the first quarter, but I absolutely concur with the Chair's view that everything is moving in the right direction as the report says. Very pleased with the youth unemployment. That is coming down, and it's coming down in stages which we would want. I'd be interested to know if there's any impact from the work that's going on with Mid-Kent College from the meeting that we had at the last committee meeting. That would interest me. My only worry about house prices going up is with the Afghan. We're trying to find houses for, I think it's 6 Afghan families, and that's not going to help our budget overall. Sorry, that's a statement rather than the question. The question on the properties sold in Maidstone, my assumption is that the drop from February 21 to April 21 is the removal of the removal of 0% stamp duty, or is there some other reason, or don't we know?
Again, that's something I probably need to go back to the performance team on to get you some kind of more information behind these numbers, but I can take that away.
Thank you. The Chief Executive would like to make a comment.
Thank you. Just to add a couple of things. you raised the issue of the Mid-Kent College scheme. That scheme hasn't yet started, and the Policy and Resources Committee tomorrow will make decisions on how to allocate the recovery and renewal funding. And the scheme with Mid-Kent College that I've sort of speculated that you were referring to is one of those. I think this committee suggested that rather than undertake a project for a year, we should try to fund for longer, and that is in the current recommendations for tomorrow night's committee. Having said that, just an observation, Mid-Kent College are incredibly proactive, and they are doing some brilliant work in terms of engagement, particularly with young people who are perhaps the most remote from the employment market. But then we can see the economy recovering more generally. And then secondly, you raised the issue of Afghan refugees. Just to bring to your attention that the Communities, Housing and Environment Committee have recently received a report on that topic. I think it was on the 5th of October, and agreed that we should make our contribution, but that would be quite modest, up to accommodating six families. So my advice would be that that's unlikely to have a major impact in terms of the housing market, although it is proving very difficult to find suitable and suitably large accommodation for the families that are currently in the bridging accommodation. In terms of stamp duty, I think the stamp duty holiday only came to an end at the end of September, so perhaps we are not seeing the full effect of that yet.
Chair, I just wonder if it might be helpful on that property trend, if the officers can get hold of perhaps figures, say, for 2019, for a year prior to the pandemic, because it'd be quite useful to see how, you know, the property market, as we all know, drops in the summer holidays and so on. It may be there's always an element of typical seasonality, which, you know, just looking at 1 year in isolation, we're not going to pick up. So that could, you know, as I say, give it the context, which might help with that sort of question.
Funnily enough, Councillor Harper, I think that work's actually being done already. And Angela and her team were looking at some additional economic data for our next reports. So I'm hoping that we'll have even more. For those that like boring data, I'm afraid I like it, but if it indicates trends and flows and where we are and where we've been and where we're going, then I find it useful. And so I know Angela is doing a great deal of work on that at the moment, and the Chief Executive may wish to say a bit more.
Well, just to add to that, and again looking in the round, as part of the work that's done in planning, we not only look at house or residential property prices, but also earnings. And I think it's the ratio between earnings and property prices that is an indicator of how much challenge there is in order for people to be able to afford accommodation in the borough. Yes, we have historical information that we can draw on and put in a future report.
You can knock me down if you like, but I do like enhancements of data. It does lead to trends, and I can get better overviews from it. Here. That's exactly because if we're going to make decisions on whatever it is, it's nice to know what else is having the other bits of data and information around us to make more informed decisions. Councillor Nagy, did you want to raise your hand?
I want to talk about something else. Is that all right?
We are on a particular agenda item.
The footfall. Yeah. The footfall. The footfall. Oh, thanks. Yeah, the footfall. I was just curious. Is there any indication with the footfall? To see it going back to what it was pre-pandemic, with all the shops that are shut, and not, you know, and there's not the offer that we used to have. It was just very. It's good. It's good. I was just wondering if there's any indication of what's attracting people. Is it shops, restaurants, or whatever? Thank you.
Well, one thing I do know, David, is Elmer did actually have a significant impact in July, particularly. And the data that came back from the Heart of Kent Hospice, I have been in touch with them, was it raised, I think it was £390,000. £390,000. Yeah, it was, sorry.
I hesitate to make this contribution because you've already looked at your work programme. In fact, I was talking to the interim chief exec from the Heart of Kent Hospice yesterday, and she has sent me, but I haven't yet read, an initial report on the economic impacts and a range of other impacts of the big Heart of Kent parade with Elmer. She also indicated that she would be open to coming to present that to you if you would find that helpful, and you know, maybe before a committee meeting one evening, something like that. So if that is something that would be attractive, then I'm more than happy to liaise with Rachel and make those arrangements.
Yeah, that's a bit of a twist, because when I was the mayor, we launched Elmer, and it was postponed for a year, so, just a nice little link there, isn't it? Destiny. Yeah, thanks for that.
I certainly, as chair, would like to take you up on that offer, Alison, because, quite frankly, I think it really did have a significant effect on the high street footfall, Elmer. I saw kids loving it, and to know that basically you scan the code on each one you see, and you walk around as many as you possibly can, I thought was incredible. I mean, the ones in Moat Park were wonderful. I mean, the ones you just bump into in amazing places. But my favourite has to be the one in the museum at the moment with the map on it. That was actually outside the town hall. And that, I think, was probably one of the most appealing and attractive of them all, because people loved the map. So, yes, we'll take you up on that offer, please. We still haven't seen Councillor Forecast yet. I would have thought he would have made it by now. Obviously, the trains aren't doing too well. Anyway, right. Item 15. Oh, sorry. Yes, we're noting. We're all agreed? Yes. And also, thanks for those that wrote the report. Thank you very much. So over to item 15. Victoria is to present this. I really wanted Councillor Forecast to hear this. But, okay, it's over to you, Victoria.
Okay, that's on, isn't it? Okay, thank you, members. This is actually the first of 3 times you'll have to put up with me speaking tonight, so apologies in advance. The Historic Plaque Scheme was approved by members of this committee back in what now feels a long time ago, in 2017. And its purpose was to offer a standard format for the memorialisation of important people and events in Maystone's history. In the recent processing procedure of, in fact, the two of the first applications for this scheme, and one of those didn't meet the criteria to come forward for approval, but we still assessed it, it did become clear that there were 1 or 2 changes or clarifications which would make the scheme more efficient in its administration and clearer to potential applicants. The report you've got includes some details to refresh members' memories or introduce it to those of you who were not here at the time of what's laid out in the agreed scheme around eligibility, design, and the responsibility of applicants and the council. The majority of that works perfectly well and will remain unchanged, but there are a few paragraphs I'd like to highlight. So, paragraph 2.6. Now that we've processed 2 of these applications, have a clearer picture of the time allocation required by each, it is proposed that a maximum of 3 applications a year is the maximum that we'll be able to assess. Currently, that figure's well above what we've actually received. But members previously mentioned that they would like to promote the scheme more widely, and obviously that capacity to handle applications would mean that the promotion of the scheme would need to be managed in such a way as not really to whet an appetite that we couldn't meet. In paragraph 2.6.3, we say that 6 months from application to decision is appropriate. It might sound like a very long time, but it is necessary to allow for background research and potential further consultation if we were, for example, to be asked to memorialise somebody who was particularly controversial or divisive. And at the risk of personalising it, we only have 1 member of staff working on this, and that's me. I would also point out it compares quite well to English Heritage, who warn you that if you want a blue plaque, it can take up to 3 years. But it is an important point that we are going to do extra work if for no other reason than to protect the council from as much, or protect the council from risk as much as possible of future complaints. I think we've all seen over the last year that memorialising anything can be a tricky concept, and we want to make sure we get it right. 2.7 is designed to make it clearer to the applicant that they are responsible for all costs after approval. That means that they are responsible not only for the creation and the fixing of the memorial, they are also responsible for the maintenance, the safety, and any repairs required after installation. That ensures that public money isn't going to be used to repair or replace plaques that are on private property. So with that in mind, I would like to ask members to accept the report with those new clarifications.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm
Thank you very much. Councillor Harper.
It's obviously a good scheme and one hopefully we'll all agree to. But I'm just wondering whether, if you're applying to put one of these on a listed building, whether you'd need also listed building consent. I'm just thinking in terms of the cost, the sort of £700 probably would be if you put it on a non-listed building. It's just to warn people that if they're going for listing, they're going to have to probably go through, you know, the planning process, and it's more likely to cost another, I don't know, number of hundreds of pounds, I would have thought. I don't know.
Off the top of my head, I can't remember how that breaks down. There are obviously costs for the making, but there are included in there fees for any planning or listed building consents that are needed, and it's up to the applicant to get those.
Councillor Newton.
One, that's it. Interesting number of pictures here, of which I've made a lot of them, to be quite honest. All have gone through the process of listed building consent, apart from one, and that's on the town hall. And this is, I'm going back historically now. There were 2 holes in the wall, which had originally had keep dogs on leads on it. Now, you know, that should never have ever been put up on the town hall. But the point is that any responsible mason or group would need to follow these rules. There are some that I disagree with you about, but particularly gilding. The best way to do any plaque, if it's in natural stone, which I mean, I actually provided a lot of information into the background of this whole report. I mean, slate memorialization is fairly, you know, it's a strong material. It letters well, which is quite important. I think you do refer to it in here about memorials being hand cut. That is the style of lettering that is done. It's not sandblasted, which is a very wide medium that's been done with memorials and things. But that should be in any recommendation, that memorials are hand cut. The style and the presentation of them and the durability of them is much more effective than having a sandblasted one. How you tell is when you look at a letter, if it's got a dimpled bottom, then, to coin a phrase, then it's been sandblasted. A memorial that, I mean, I've personally done a lot of these for the War Graves Commission. They're V-cuts. When you look at a letter, it's a V-cut in there, and that will last considerably longer than a sandblasted letter. Plus, it looks better anyway. But no, it's interesting. But as I say, you have referred to gilding. I know there's one that's been gilded, which is right opposite the museum, which was for Havoc Square because it commemorated. It wanted to be significant for people during the Battle of Maidstone that were killed in Havoc in that area. So, you know, there must be judgments of whether one thing is appropriate or it's not appropriate. And any mason worth his salt would be looking at that as being an important factor in developing these. The one that's in front of the ophthalmic hospital, Nolan. Nolan, in fact, had quite a lot of significance to Maidstone. He was the cavalry master for the charge of the Light Brigade, in fact, and he was killed. He was the first one, apparently, that was killed there. But what we did with that was one hell of a lot of research to put the history of the charge of the Light Brigade on there. And so many people have commented they didn't realise what went on. Nolan was based in Maidstone at the cavalry centre, which is where the pub is. That was the White Rabbit. That was his officers' mess. So there's a lot of significance in Maidstone. A lot of significance needs to be applied with any memorialisation. But anyway, I've said my bit. So. But any questions, I'm glad to answer them to the best of my ability. But the criteria is important for any one of these that is produced.
I was admiring your work at the the Nolan one a couple of months ago, on the Elm. It's nice to know that you did the work on it.
Well, we did the work on
the history of it. It's fascinating.
The one that I've been asked about is William Shipley at the present time. It's dropped to pieces, basically, because the wrong material in its location. Portland stone is not a durable material for a long period. That really, and I did actually offer to do it, would be to take the circular memorial out and replace it with a slate memorial, cut with exactly the same style on there, which would at least protect its significance.
Gordon, if you're finished.
Yeah, I think so, as long as I haven't got the bill at the end of the day, because at my age I'm not really going to be worrying about it for perpetuity.
I'll ask Victoria to comment, but of course you've just stunned and surprised some of us and told us about dimpled bottoms again. And I actually thought there was something you found in when you were baking cakes.
Thank you. I was very worried where that comment was going then. Yes, I would say that the format of the plaques is something that was agreed as part of the original 2017 discussion, and so that's the format that we currently seek. The Shipley plaque, I think, actually really illustrates very well why we need to be clear about whose issue it is if we have a problem with a plaque in future, and it would lay out very clearly that the council simply doesn't have budget or capacity to do repairs or replacements. I do know that I believe it was our Arts and Culture Officer, Anne-Marie, was discussing the Shipley plaque at some stage with the Royal Society for the Arts. Obviously, as their founder, they may have an interest in it. So there were some conversations going on. I can find out where they're at for you.
Do you want to come back, Gordon?
Yeah, can I just clarify that we weren't involved in the first one? So, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor S. Webb.
Must be me then. Can I say I am absolutely delighted with this report because it highlights something very positive that we're doing for Maidstone and maybe for former residents of Maidstone. And I'd actually like to, he said, not very cleverly, looking for section 3, which is to accept 3.1. To propose that we accept the report, which lays out more specifically the responsibilities of the scheme, administrator and procedural timescales for applicants.
So you're happy with the recommendation, but want a slight modification?
No, I just read it out.
No, you still want to stick to the exact principles?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, right, okay, fine. So that's proposed. Is there anybody seconding? The other web. Yes, it's been noticed, so S web and R web. Yes. Fine, thanking you. And now you've got your scheme review through. You can tell us more, Victoria.
Thank you. So in which case, it's my absolute pleasure to present what I believe is the first application that has come to committee under the scheme since 2017. So we have received an application, as you can see, from Golding Homes, who wish to raise a plaque on the building at Wren's Corner, known as Judge's House, which was the former Kent Constabulary headquarters. So it's a Grade 2 listed building, and they are aware of the need for listed building consent. It's a 19th century, early 19th century house. It was acquired by the then Kent County Constabulary, Kent County Constabulary in 1857 when they rented it and purchased it a few years later. The significance of that is that the Kent County Constabulary were the first professional civilian police service in England. The house was the earliest base of their commissioner, and around it then grew up the entire headquarters site, which, as you can see from the report, included all sorts of things at one stage, including stables and a driving school. Hopefully not at the same time. Seriously, I think it's clear that that house on that site is an important part of the social history of Maidstone and the county, and Maidstone as the county town. Golding Homes have acknowledged their responsibilities, and I did discuss with them those points which have actually been clarified in the last report, and they are content with those, even though technically when the application was submitted, those points were not in the official policy, but they quite accepting of those. And so for the reasons of significance to the local history, I would ask that members approve their application.
Thank you very much, Victoria. And since we have a ward member for High Street, I'd like to ask Councillor English to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak. I'm so glad, as the co-author of the original member request that brought this to committee when it was first approved, to actually see that this policy, albeit amended by the previous item on the agenda, finally becoming live and actually something of substance happening. I was involved, although not in such an important a role as Gordon, with the Nolan Memorial, and it has attracted and continues to attract a huge amount of attention. This isn't of the same scale, of course, but it is important for a town like Maidstone, if we're going to have a future, and we talked about footfall and reasons for people coming to a town, to actually make sure that those areas of historic interest in the town, and there are very, very many historic features of great interest and mild interest in Maidstone, of which this is an important part of history. We need to commemorate that, we need to flag it up, because that is part of not just remembering our past, educating our people, but actually having a future that will be able to commemorate us in due course. So I hope that members will approve the report and that we will see other applications of this type coming forward in due course.
I can only actually say hear to that, Clive. And thanking you very much as a visiting member to come here and present and make your point. It's always good to see visiting members. Councillor Hinder first and Councillor Newton next.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this scheme and I'm so pleased it's going through. Just one minor point, Chair. Under additional considerations on page 33, I believe this used to be the Heritage, Culture and Leisure Committee. Should that now be changed to Economic Regeneration and Leisure? That's what we were called, isn't it?
That is a correct note, and we'll make note of that, Bob. Councillor Newton.
Thanks, Chair. If this is the proposed inscription that is going on there, on this building, which has obviously been restored very significantly, is there not more that can be added to this particular plaque? And, you know, the name Golding Homes probably put at the bottom somewhere. But I think what is proposed here, which is obviously in black and white, should be more to emphasise the significance of that building and its site.
I have to say, Councillor Newton, Gordon, I agree with you. I mean, I think, generally speaking, I think most of us applaud and support such schemes. And and let's even make the most of it and explore it even greater. Is that possible to be done, Victoria?
Yes, there's nothing in the policy that says what wording people should use. I think that in terms of how much can go on the plaque, it'll depend on literally what wording will fit. But I'm more than happy to go back to the representative of Golding Homes that I've been dealing with to see if we can come up with a choice of words that might give a little extra information. If members are happy for me to do that without coming back to them, or that would be useful, and we can make sure that the significance then is really boosted.
Councillor Harper, did you want to comment on that particular issue or another?
I did actually, thanks, Chair. I was looking at the policy just while we were going through this, and it says that you can target around 19 words on your inscription. There's only 13 here, so there is definitely some scope, because the bit which one of the things I found most interesting when you were introducing the report, which I perhaps hadn't picked up when I read the paper, was the fact that this was the first county-wide police force in the whole country. And I think that's really a significant point. It's not just the first headquarters for the Kent Police, but it's the first headquarters for any police force in the country. And I think somehow within the extra bit of wording we can do, if we can get that sort of flavour across, because that's, as I say, for me, when you were introducing it, that was the most interesting point for me, the fact that this was the first police force virtually in the country, and the fact that, it was based in Maidstone, even if it was only the first by a year or two. It's still, I think it's a bit of a coup, really, wasn't it, for the place at the time?
Thank you, Paul. I think Victoria is getting the sense of message. Councillor Newton, you want to make a further point?
Yeah, presumably the first police force here had an insignia, which probably somewhere in the museum, surely, there must be a copy of its badge. That would be a very useful thing to put on the top of it, so it draws people's attention to what it is. Can that be looked at? Look for?
Certainly we could help with looking at the insignia. I can discuss that again with Golding Homes. I suppose from their point of view it might make the carving a little more expensive, but I'm sure we can find the insignia.
I've got two more raised hands, Councillor Nagy, or three more. Councillor Nagy first.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Also, with family members, apparently, the only German prisoner of war to escape was in Canada. They made a film about him, but apparently, when he was captured, that's where they took him to. He was held there. Is that right? You heard that one?
That is right, and all I can say is it's a great film.
Exactly. So, but that gives that building a bit more kudos in, because people just seem to remember that for some reason, and my mum was right.
Councillor Esqueb.
Yes, thank you. I just wonder, with the information that we are suggesting is put onto this plaque, we may be looking at either a larger plaque or two plaques. And I don't say that humorously, but I think taking the tenor of the meeting and the importance of this building, and certainly the historical events that have taken place over time there, I think it's really important we get this right. And therefore what I am going to suggest, and Victoria's face will now drop like a stone, is that I do think actually if you could bring back a set of proposals for what is likely to be written on the plaque, I think I'd like to be part of that decision-making process, please.
Can I first say we actually still haven't agreed it yet. And so before we actually do, I think we have a recommendation to take forward once we make agreement, but the Chief Executive wishes to say something.
Just a suggestion really, which might be a halfway house. For agility and sort of speed of going backwards and forwards, then something that we quite often do is to progress things in consultation with the chair and the vice chair of the committee. If that would be acceptable, then it might just may make things a little bit efficient. Yeah. Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Do we say we do that? We delegate it to an officer in discussion. Yes. So I'm assuming at the moment we will agree, but Councillor Cannon, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just briefly. So Golding Homes on there, is that sort of, are we assuming they want that as part of funding it? And then the second bit is, I mean, are we able to ask them, or just say, if you rebrand, because it's the sort of organisation that will rebrand at some point, they'll change it?
I suspect, yeah, maybe that comes under maintenance and repair. I mean, I suppose that the importance of this for me is that people aren't obliged to join our scheme to put up a plaque. What we've been trying to do is to encourage that standardisation. And I suppose my only concern is if we make it so hemmed in by what's allowed and what isn't allowed, or by what members, or as people will just see the council decides goes on there, that a lot of people may decide that it's too much hassle or there's too much onus. Obviously, I think with an organisation like this, we know full well they have capacity and they have staff who can deal with that sort of thing. I would be more worried about a small community group, but I think maybe that's one of the things that as we get different applications, it'll become clear whether there's a scale of expectation that we're happy to push back on, or how members feel. But absolutely, in this case, I think they're a big organisation. They can take our comments on board.
Okay, members, so I'm going to ask Democratic Services Office to review and give us the new addendum onto our recommendation.
So just adding onto the end, so we've got that the application to erect a commemorative plaque at Wrens Cross be approved, subject to the approval of additional wording by the Chair and Vice Chair of the committee in collaboration with the officer. Yep, I can switch that round.
I should say.
Bear with. I mean, I think we all know where we're going with that one. So it's seconded. Thank you very much, Councillor Harper. Did you want to read it again, do you think? I mean, we know what we're voting for. Subject to the approval of additional work with the officer in consultation with the chair and the vice chair.
Additional work.
Yeah. Just, did you want to do, Victoria, for the sake of the, do you want to do additional work or additional wording? Bear with, but for the sake of it, I mean, I think we're fairly clear in what we're agreed. I will take the vote and ask for your agreement. Are we all agreed? It's been proposed and seconded, and we're all agreed. That's unanimous, yes? Oh, sorry, one abstention. One abstention. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4, 1 abstain. Right, we now come to item 17. And again, it's your night tonight, Victoria. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman. So item 17 refers to the report we were asked to bring to members to feedback on how the first 6 months of some fairly major changes have gone. So at the start of the financial year 21-22, Maidstone Museums introduced some major amendments to opening hours, staffing and revenue budgets as part of the plan to achieve the Council's medium-term financial strategy. 6 months on, I'd like to update members on progress. Revenue savings of £152,000 were required. £138,000 worth were to be found from the reduction of staffing costs occasioned by seasonal opening hours at the main museum on St Faith Street and the opening by appointment of the Carriage Museum. £14,000 of revenue savings were identified, and the Museum Friends, the Maidstone Museum Foundation, have made a significant investment in contactless technology to encourage non-ring-fenced financial donations from the public. And they have agreed that their target for each year in donations will be £14,000. And I will come back to some information on how we've met those targets in a moment. After appropriate consultation, a new staffing structure was implemented on the 1st of April 2021. The full saving of £138,000 was identified, but as we show in the report, the Council's payment protection policy came into effect, and so the full saving won't be achieved until the end of year 3. Those staff at the museum who are not employed in front of house visitor services now all work part-time at a variety of hours, up to a maximum of 30 hours, 4 days a week, in a standard Tuesday to Friday pattern. Visitor services staff, which consists of 4 individuals and a supervisor, work on an annualised hours basis with a rota that reflects the new opening pattern, which was devised to provide a better service at times of peak demand. So what that change means is that now the museum opens on 4 days a week from mid-February to mid-December, except during school holidays when we're able to open 6 days a week. And in order to make that possible, the museum is closed to the public during the very quiet period, which is mid-December to mid-February. Non-visitor, i.e. non-front-facing staff, will work normally during that time, either from home or in the museum. And I have a long list of items from my team that I asked them for previously about what their teams will be doing during that closure period, and it will include things like staff training, but also, for example, the collections team will be auditing objects which are in galleries that we normally struggle to do without getting in the way of the public, and doing some cleaning. The Carriage Museum remains open by appointment to groups, and we've had 2 tours of that museum since we reopened in May, and another one which I believe is already booked. Oh no, although a number of posts were deleted as part of our restructure, no compulsory redundancies had to be made. 2 of our colleagues found alternate employment, and fortunately, other posts were vacant at the time. Sorry. It's, again, although Councillor Round mentioned it earlier, it is worth reminding members that 2 of the staff in the learning team are externally funded, and so they have been retained on their previous hours. That external funding is reviewed and awarded annually. And so any retraction or reduction in this scheme by the Department for Education, who ultimately fund it through the Arts Council, remains a threat to the museum's provision of services to children, young people and schools. In addition to their regular roles, the non-visitor staff have taken on a rota duty officer responsibility. And each nominated person, essentially for a week, takes on being the contact point for any inquiries, issues or other matters that cannot be handled immediately by the front of house staff. With generally fewer staff on site and some hybrid working taking place, this means that our visitor services staff have a nominated staff member to support them at all times. The duty officer role is also applied to Saturdays and any other times of sickness or absence. And I would just like to commend those people in my team for having taken on those roles who haven't had to do it before. They've been enormously supportive of colleagues and took that on flexibly, willingly, while managing their own workloads and work hours. So the staffing rota that was devised for the visitor services team over 12 months has generally been effective. But with the help of a certain elephant, we were able to see that at busy times in the school holidays, there just isn't enough slack in the system. It doesn't allow us to cope with unplanned absences, such as when our VEO supervisor got pinged and had to isolate for COVID. In order to make certain that there's enough resilience there, a budget increase may be needed and will be brought forward separately. By the end of August, so 5 months into the new regime, 4 out of 5 visitor experience staff had resigned. 3 of them mentioned that annualised hours rota had had some impact on their decision. I would say, however, that all 4 had other jobs to go to, and I'm very pleased that one of them has moved up into a post within the communications team that is an area in which he's very interested in developing his career. So we're very happy for all of them, really. The issue that came up was that during school holidays, the visitor experience officers are required to work 6 days a week with no option to take days off. When we were planning, that seemed like a perfectly reasonable thing to do because it would be balanced out by the fact that they are not expected to work during the closed period. I think it became clear to us all that as a new way of working, it became clear that it wasn't flexible enough for staff to be comfortable. And it's become even clearer during our recruitment process to replace those staff members who left that the requirements weren't understood by some potential applicants and didn't work for many people who have caring or other responsibilities, especially during school holidays. We will review what flexibility we have to look at perhaps allowing some of those days, especially in the summer holidays, which are 6 weeks long. And also because of other people who had mentioned that the closure period in the winter is quite a long time to go without contact with the museum. We're looking at how we can bring people back for some contact days during that time, whether that be for work-related, task-related items like a stock take, or whether there is training and other things that we need to do in person. So, although we feel that we have been managing very well, there has been a knock-on effect of reductions in staff time. We hope that the impact on our visitors for these has been minimised, and we did work very hard to ensure that our customers, as they are, would still get the best experience we could. But some activities have ceased, others have been reduced in frequency. We've had no visitor feedback on this yet. I have some anecdotal evidence that people have tried to access the museum on the days we're closed, even though there might be staff in the building. But we're going to proactively seek visitors' views with a new visitor survey. And we're in the process of putting that together now, just a short tablet-based survey for visitors, asking them the usual questions around where they've come from, why they're at the museum, sorry, that sounds terribly aggressive, why they have visited the museum, whether it was for anything particular, and also whether the opening hours work for them. We're constantly also reviewing our priorities. We want to ensure that we're still offering the best service we can, and that means making sure that what we thought 6 months ago were the best priorities for customers really are. As for the further savings, we have identified £14,000 worth of savings in our revenue budget. But I think, as we've seen, it's fair to say that much will rest on our ability to raise and meet income targets. And it is important, I think, to mention that the contribution that the Mason Museum Foundation are making there, and both the financial investment and the investment in their time, will be extremely valuable in ensuring that that comes in as income to the museum. While we've only had a very limited reopening period to refer to, I think it's clear that the summer holidays got us off on a great footing. And again, I think the triple whammy of opening for 6 days during school holidays, Elmer's Trail and Star Wars temporary exhibition was very successful for us. And again, I've mentioned several times now that the Carriage Museum is currently only open to groups. We are working on what the role of that museum is in the longer term, and the importance of the collection, and how we improve access to those stories and use of the objects. But I think the important short-term goal is getting the museum open for the May to September season in 2022, and we aim to do that by recruiting and training a dedicated volunteer group who will allow those opening and be the welcoming face of that museum. As members know, we are working on bringing forward detailed proposals around the museum's capital expenditure in November. The 3 options haven't changed, but we have done some more detailed work on those for members. I will just mention that we've had an enormously generous offer of potential funding for an improved archaeology gallery from the William and Edith Oldham Trust, and clearly we will provide the details of that offer in November. So that work is still going ahead, I assure you. When members agreed the mid-term financial strategy, and restructure last year, they also made it very clear to us at the museum that volunteers were going to play an important part in our future. Since then, we have reviewed our current capacity to support volunteers and grow their presence. As we say in the report, we don't currently have any official capacity, but we have been working with the South East Museum's development team on the theory and the work we need to do behind the scenes to get ourselves into a place where our policies and procedures are correct, and to bring forward serious work by volunteers within the museum, whether that be allowing us to open the Carriage Museum, to carry out activities around research and feedback that will allow us to present much more reliable data-based evidence through things like object handling in galleries, which provide a better experience to visitors. And I think most importantly, what it will do is open up to residents a chance to be involved in their museum. So, in conclusion, there's a lot packed in, and obviously I'm very happy to answer questions on it. I'd like to say that we have made much progress so far. There is still a lot more to do, and we will keep you up to date with how we are doing.
Thank you very much indeed, Victoria. I think your summing up really says a great deal. You've done a great deal. You're obviously continuing to review, and you think there's lots more to do. Whilst we have a 20-year plan, it's nice to know that the team we have are always looking at ways to review, improve, modify, etc. And I'm sure members here have, certainly picked up a number of key points that you brought out. I mean, you've obviously had a tough time of it in some ways, as we all have with COVID, but you've had to address a new set of issues, a new set of working practices, new displays even, and look at how you make yourselves more, let's say, more interesting. That is always a difficult job in any sense for a museum to do, especially when you've got twice as many artifacts as you have space to put it in. But you have brought out a number of issues, and dare I say, whilst we're here to note the progress in Maidstone Museum, I think we may well finish up with a number of recommendations, and one of the recommendations I would certainly like to make at this stage is that all your team, the officers of the museum, be thanked for their efforts over the last period of particularly uncertain times. And so that, I'm suggesting, unless anybody tells me otherwise, will be one of the recommendations I am proposing for tonight.
Chairman, just briefly, Councillor Forecast is unable to get in through the door, so shall I go?
If he could stand on the scaffolding, couldn't he? Thank you very much, Councillor Cannon, for that. Let's see if we can wait for Councillor Forecast to come in, because before we take the debate any further, I will have to be asked for any lobbying or disclosures from him when he does enter the room. So I'll carry on. Certainly, Paul.
Can I just second the thing about the vote of thanks to the staff, because as chair of the committee, when we had to vote this through, when we set the budget, it was a big ask of the staff, and whilst I'm sure it's not gone, completely smoothly, I think the staff have done everything they can do to bring in a new structure and to keep the museum running, plus with COVID on top. So I do think, and I know they might not, they might think it's a bit half-hearted, but I think we are all genuinely wanting the staff to know that we are supporting them. We understand what situation we put them in, and we respect the fact that they seem to be able to cope and still taking the museum forward in not a good situation financially. So I think we need to get the message to them that they've got the support of the committee. So I'm happy to second Martin's wording.
So thanking you, Councillor Harper, that's one recommendation that may well come out of this. Now that Councillor Forecast has arrived, I have to ask, have you been lobbied about any particular items tonight, most of which you've missed, but we are now discussing the museum at the moment?
No lobbying, Chairman, and please can I just put on record my apologies for being late to yourself and members and officers.
We fully understand in the circumstances. And do you have any particular disclosures?
No.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to open it up to debate, and I've seen a number of hands come up already on the matter. But I've also, before I go into further debate, I have had a number of discussions. As Victoria's already said, there's going to be future reports, and we're breaking it down into little chunks, including just one bit on the Carriage Museum, etc., in our work programme. So I have worked with officers, and we are looking at ways in which we can review this. And maybe it's pertinent if I can ask the Chief Executive to explain where we might have a few options at the moment.
Okay, so maybe if we just reflect for a moment on the opportunities that have already been identified in your work programme. So, as you noted earlier, and I think Victoria reiterated in her presentation, you are due to have a report in November that specifically relates to the availability of capital resources. So they are already budgeted for and contained within the capital programme. From recollection, that's just under £400,000. I think it's 389, so let's say 400 in the round. Now, I am aware that that has been discussed on a number of occasions by the committee in the past, and various options will come forward in November for your consideration. So I think that gives you the opportunity to look at enhancements to the museum with resources that are already secured. I think that's an important point against the background of the changes that Victoria has just described. And if I may, just to reiterate both what the Chair has said and Councillor Harper, I think the team at the museum is to be commended for its constructive approach to a very difficult task in the context of a very difficult financial position for the whole council. But when it's happening to you, then that is the most difficult thing to deal with. So I'd say, firstly, you do have the opportunity in November to look at the future. As far as revenue resources are concerned, then we are about to go into the budget-making process for 2022-23, and we're undertaking the normal rhythm of consideration for the medium-term financial strategy as well. So some of the points that Victoria has referred to, for example, putting the right infrastructure in place to enable more volunteering to be accommodated, may be something that you want to consider when you look at what you want to incorporate into the discussion around how we use revenue resources in the future. So there isn't revenue secured in the same way as capital has been already, but you may want to highlight those points. I don't think it would be fair for me to miss the point, though, that we do have finite resources. Let's not forget that will be the case. A further thing you may want to consider doing is to, and again, in your work programme, you have reference to a further report on the impact of the changes at the museum, and Victoria has referred to a visitor survey that is to be done. My suggestion to you is that once you have that information, then that's the time at which to evaluate the effectiveness of the current operational model for the museum. And then thinking more strategically than that, I know that one of the key topics in the past, and which continues to be pertinent today, is the status of the museum. So at the moment, it's a council-owned asset. It has a number of trusts attached to it, which makes the governance quite complicated. But you may want to go back and revisit that. And I know there's been a tremendous amount of work done with the existing trusts, with a view to perhaps modernising some of those relationships And that in turn may throw up other opportunities for the status of the museum going forward. So I'm hoping I've hit the right buttons there, Chair, and obviously also happy to take any further questions.
Thank you very much indeed. I mean, I think that gives us a sense of opportunity and flavour of where we could go, what we should be deciding. And with a view to things may change, things have to be reviewed. We need to look at how to do things bigger, better, or different. Some of us, certainly museum director, head of economic development, and myself, maybe a few others, are proposing to go and have a look at a few other museums to see how they do it. And one of them we've been particularly featured. I know it's a particularly popular tourist resort next to a royal pavilion, but we understand that Brighton's quite an innovative museum that we need to go and look at. So that's one of the trips we're proposing to go and see and sort of do some benchmarking exercises. And so, as Victoria says, we're constantly reviewing, we're constantly looking at ways of what we can do, but I open it up to the floor now on the basis that our Chief Executive has painted a few options for us. And I start with Councillor Esweb first.
Yes, and can I first of all thank the Chief Executive for that input. It was very valuable, and it's very good to have you here. One thing I would like to have undertaken is, we could call it a business plan, but what I would like to see within that business plan is a continual display and rotation of the artifacts that are currently in the museum, so that over a period of a few months, then hence over the year or 2 years, that we promote more of what we've got than we've been able to do. Now, that isn't a negative, I'm looking at the positives here. So that there is an ongoing promotion every 2 months or so of the historical artifacts, the impact for Maidstone, on Maidstone, and to bring in more visitors, but particularly the young people we have in the primary schools and secondary schools, to get them into the museum to see exactly what we've got, because I think we've got an awful lot that is, in the nicest sense, hidden away, because it's had to be. But in that sense, so coming back to the point I'm making, could we have, please, a projection of a better use of the artifacts for the residents of Maidstone over time, be that a business plan or be that whatever it may be. Second point would be, great idea from the Chief Exec putting money in there to a new exhibition hall or whatever to enhance it. But could we look at bringing in some modernisation of perhaps displays, perhaps interactive displays for people when they come into the museum, to have a better experience, to put the artifacts that we are putting on show into a better context, rather than just looking and reading, but actually I'm reminded of Stratford-upon-Avon with the Bard, and you stand there and an awful lot of information comes out, different speakers, different actors doing it. I'm not suggesting that, but you understand the context of it's a different experience rather than what museums normally have, which is a glass display written down, and if you have to read, you know, a full page of A4, which isn't very tantalising sometimes, it's not going to encourage people in. But I'm sorry that's long, but just a few ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I'm fairly well aware, having had chats with the museum staff, that they are full of ideas themselves. And that's one of the reasons why we're going to Brighton. But at the end of the day, whatever we do is going to cost money. And there are finite resources, and that's why I thank the Chief Executive again for her contribution, because we need to look at some more different ways. But I'll ask the museum director to comment.
Thank you. Gosh, I don't want to sound very negative here, but what I'm going to say is that the turnover of objects in all museums does tend to be, let's say, rather slow. We have 650,000 artifacts, and you're right, that's huge, and we do only have a proportion of them on display. I just think a couple of background things that we need to bear in mind. There are, in those 650,000 things, an awful lot of things that are not suitable for display. Archaeology is always great for this because you end up with bags of soil samples. And to be honest, even the best archaeology only wants to look at a few of those. So that there is a finite number of objects which are suitable for display, which could be displayed without a large amount of conservation, or that we have room for. And again, please don't think I'm making excuses, but in developing something like, for example, a new gallery, what we would be looking to do is to tell a story. And so the objects that we choose to go in that gallery, and I have to say that the, for example, our current archaeology gallery is very object light. There are limited cases, fashions change, and the stories that we tell change, collections change. So any work in that way, I think, would be looking at increasing the number of objects on display, telling the story much better. I'd like to think any of you who've been into the Ancient Lives Gallery about Egypt at the museum will see the difference, unfortunately hammered by COVID, the difference there that the interactive elements do make to a gallery. But actually, in some respects, money is only one of our problems. The truth is that the preparation, the research, and the mounting of those objects takes way much more time than we always think it's going to do, which is why we're usually sweeping the gallery as the guests arrive for an opening. So while we are absolutely committed to improving access to those objects for all our visitors, and as I said earlier, you know, different ways we do that. We hope to bring things out for special events, or we are updating new smaller galleries. I hope that members will understand that doing anything on say, a bi-monthly cycle, we tend to look more at sort of 5-year cycles. But I'm happy to talk through the process if anybody really wants.
Councillor Webb, do you want to come back?
Yes, I was hypothetical suggestions, really, because I am not a museum curator and therefore haven't got a clue about how long that takes. I think the word that I was missing was innovation into the museum. And of course, I understand what you're saying about ensuring that the artifacts themselves are displayed in a way that is going to be meaningful for everybody. Hence the business plan, or hence whatever you want to call it, so that over time, members of the committee have got a good understanding of the time period it takes for you to do it, and also a dig for the finance to make sure that you have an appropriate sum, be it another member of staff, to be able to focus on that singularly. But again, I understand the Chief Executive's point that there is a finite budget. Thank you.
By all means, come back, Victoria.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm a little clearer after that. I think that it's important I say now that we have a 20-year plan, the objectives and the vision we are absolutely committed to. It's clear that after our previous bid was rejected by the lottery, that although we still have the same objectives and the same vision for the service, we as a team need to look at how we deliver that change, that vision over the years. And I think that actually that's the piece of work that you're probably referring to, and I think it fits very well with what work that we know we have to do and are already planning. So.
Thank you, Victoria. Councillor Harper.
Yeah, can I suggest that when we bring the next report back on the museum, that Victoria puts in an element of background from the work which we did back in 2019-20, because picking up Councillor Webb's issues, we actually did develop a plan to redevelop or renew the whole of the museum over a 3-year period, and it was costed up to, from memory, around £5 to £7 million. Now, once we had done that work, we actually submitted a grant application to the Arts Council to seek significant funding, and unfortunately we were turned down. And I almost remember, I was scribbling down just now, I think we were turned down either in the end of 2019 or the beginning of 2020, because I remember lots of discussions with Victoria. Yeah, with Victoria, yeah, so 2020, with Victoria and John about how could we react to it. Because in turning us down, they said there was lots of interesting points they'd like to discuss with, with Maidstone. And we'd actually got to a point where we'd arranged for the assessor to come down to the museum, and myself and the officers, the vice chair, and a number of other people were going to be there to meet the assessor so he could engage with them and actually bring to life our proposal. And then, as you say, the week she was due to come down, the first national lockdown happened. And then clearly the Arts Council, with all the heritage, the lottery funding, completely stopped all of its old programmes of which we were applying to. So that sort of set us back massively in the project, and that's where the money, the £389,000, which the Chief Executive referred to, that was going to be the council's element of match funding. So we've still got that money available to invest, which I know Victoria's looking at bringing a report to us in November. But yeah, so the background was we precisely wanted to do the point you were saying, Simon. We were going to have 3 story themes: the story of Maidstone, Maidstone in the world, looking at our international collections, the Japanese and the Brenchley and so on. And then I've forgotten the theme of the third one, but it's basically prehistory and the dinosaurs. So there were going to be the 3 themes. The museum was going to be sort of themed around that. I mean, it was really exciting. But as I say, unfortunately, the pandemic put a stop to that. And clearly now, in terms of working forward, we still want to get there. And I'm sure the committee, when Victoria sort of explains a bit more, a bit of that background, I'm sure you'll all endorse it, where we want to get to. But obviously, it's, rather than, if you like, over perhaps 3 years, if it would have been successful with that funding, it's going to take a lot longer. It's going to be, obviously, as we can get resources, as we perhaps can bid for new grants. But that's definitely where I think we all want to get to. One of the things I was also going to ask is when you do bring a future reports to us, is on paragraph 2.7, and which is where you're referring to our learning team, which has been funded by the Arts Council for about 7 or 8 years now, I think. 10 years, longer than I was, yeah, but is that's not guaranteed. And if they were to cease that funding, and I think we need to have a report within one of your reports to let us know what the implication would be. So, and I was just thinking in terms of timing, the Chief Exec says, obviously, if you like, the budget process gives us time to look at it. We will be looking at the budget at this committee both in December and January. And I think from memory, the January cycle is when we propose any growth items or whatever to council. So you've really got December, January to sort of encapsulate everything, which I'm sure others are going to raise as well. So so that we're ready to do it. And my last thing really at this stage is just to ask, obviously, if visits are being done to other museums to get ideas, well, you know, to ask the chair if the invitations to those visits can be extended to all committee members so that we've all got the same level of base information as we go forward. Thank you.
On that last point, Victoria, I mean, you've already been in touch with Brighton, haven't you? I mean, would they take a larger group?
I will certainly ask them. They're usually very welcoming. And if not, we can always pay the entry fee.
Okay, on the many other matters, Councillor Harper, yes, I mean, I was around when you were chair as well. So I have discussed a number of those elements, and as a result, depending on the debate, I've got another couple of recommendations for tonight that I think you'll probably be quite pleased with in terms of absorbing what you've just said. In other words, I'm hoping that we're going to actually make a further presentation with further feedback on work of the museum. We know it's going to happen already, but we're going to, I think we need to include a recommendation that includes the Chief Executive's couple of inputs, very key inputs that she's made. And so I won't mention them just at the moment, but I've got some rough wording already. And I'll listen to the remainder of the debate, but I'm fairly sure we will not be forgetting what you just said. So, Councillor Hinder.
Thank you, Chair. I've participated in these debates and discussions now for quite a number of years. And Victoria, you have my greatest sympathy. I personally would not want to see the museum disappear or go downhill, and I'd do all I could to get it going. Trouble is, I think, though, that it's trying to drag the museum into the 21st century. I have two sons who are both high up in marketing, and I've discussed this with them at depth. And they both said, Dad, somehow you've got to change the way the thinking operates. And I'd like to offer one wild suggestion that came out of my talks with them. People take youngsters, for instance, somewhere, and they come home and they've got a t-shirt. Been there, done it, and got the t-shirt. We've all seen it. We don't do that with the museum. Now, over the road from the museum, you've got Fremlin Walk. And in Fremlin Walk, you see pop-up stores where people can go and get a picture done, or get a t-shirt printed, etc., etc. A wild thought, why not link up, for instance, someone who's trying to build a local employment to trade in that, printing t-shirts, and say to them, well, hey, could you link up with us if we put on an exhibition or whatever for the museum? Could you come and link up with us so that we can give something back to the people that come to the museum and come to that exhibition? That there then is youngsters or even adults walking around Maidstone advertising free of charge what's been going on in the museum. I offer it as a wild thought.
Bob, that's a very interesting concept. I mean, I must confess that as you were talking, the first thing that reminds me, and I don't think it's public yet, but there's a brand new piece of very posh graffiti in the new bus station. And it's well, you can't call it graffiti, it's a mural. It would make an absolutely superb t-shirt. And maybe that's an idea that, I'm not going to ask Victoria to follow through on that. It might be something more for Anne-Marie, or maybe even Maidstone Museum Foundation. But it's certainly an idea that would be considered. I mean, yeah, we've got a damn good museum. What's wrong with having t-shirts of it? You know, it really is a very valid, you know, we should be proud of our museum and shout out for the rooftop in whatever ways possible. And there are, anyway, Victoria, you can comment.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I think branding and looking at what we sell in the museum shop, what we provide to visitors is important. We are doing some work. We seem to be doing work in all areas at the moment, but we are doing some work around how the museum is marketed, the capacity that comms have to do that, and those areas that perhaps are more museum specific. Looking at how we get our messages out, where we are talking to people, and again, how things that come out of the museum do that very well. For example, for children, we have Spike, the dinosaur, who is absolutely accurate in his portrayal, being orange and fluffy. And I defy anyone to tell me dinosaurs weren't. But I think you're right. I think looking at a huge range, whether that ends up being T-shirts or other products, we have had in the past tea towels and mugs and a range of things. But I think that bearing in mind all the time, getting that feedback from the public about what they'd be interested in and feedback from other museums about what sells well for them is something that we're looking at, and it will be very much in the role of the newly recruited front of house supervisor once they're in post.
Thank you for stimulating that, Bob, because I think it is something that we need to consider, and maybe, as I did mention, have a conversation with Maidstone Museum Friends Foundation as well. Councillor Cannon.
Just two points. The new opening hours, you may be waiting for your survey to have some more details on that. So if that's the case, just say. But in your opinion, have you got the ideal opening hours now, as sort of being in charge of the museum? And then the second point is, in terms of the town centre strategy, do you think how can the museum be supporting that going forward, and do you have the staff to do it?
Gosh, I'll take the first question first because it's easier. I'm not sure that we have got them exactly right, but at the moment we really only have evidence from our side. I think staff would tell you that it's quite nice that the museum closes at 4 and they've got an hour or so without the public in. But I think that you're absolutely right. I think the important thing is that we're getting feedback from the public. I think the visitor figures over the summer have shown us that longer opening hours during school holidays is a bit of a no-brainer. But the hours that we're opening the rest of the time we need to look at, and we haven't even been through a closure period yet. And I think there are some attractions where people are used to that. If you go to an outside site, obviously, like the Historic Dockyard in Chatham, people know that that won't be open. And even the Carriage Museum, I think that rather than the rearranged opening hours, I think the real challenge for us, or where we may be challenged, will be about the fact that we have a total closure period. Now, until we go through that, I may be pleasantly surprised and no one misses us at all. But I think that's something for me to come back to you on afterwards. Where we sit within the economic redevelopment plan is that, how can I put this politely, we play our role in a way that's identified by our colleagues who frankly have a background in economic regeneration. We always seek to be part of those plans, and certainly the Maidstone Museums Foundation will let us know if we haven't made a big enough appearance. But I think that what we try to do is we try to link very much what we are already planning and maybe looking at for the next few months, and ensure that that ties in with what our colleagues in ED are doing.
Thank you, Victoria. I mean, I can take answers to that question as well, Councillor Cannon. Certainly myself as chair of this committee, I have made a point in engaging at other officer level in terms of what we are talking about, this town centre strategy, which currently of course is being fed through the Policy and Resources Committee. And only this morning I actually had a meeting, an official meeting, with Phil Coyne, our interim director who's charged with this project. I can honestly say it's early days yet, and there are decisions yet to be made at Policy and Resources, but we're at a point where we're really scoping the potential. And as I mentioned earlier, I had a meeting with the museum staff last week, and they don't know, they actually don't know, no disrespect to them, but they don't know enough themselves yet. None of us know enough yet because we're still scoping. But the museum staff certainly showed their commitment and interest in being very much part of a cultural scene within the entire element of our town centre management. I mean, the town centre management is a much bigger scheme, per se, than just culture and community, but we're certainly, the right people are talking to the right people at the moment, and the museum, the staff are fully on board with it. And it's something that certainly John Foster and Phil Coyne will be taking a lead on. But I'll ask Alison to go on.
Thank you. I've been promoted. So just to complement what the Chair has just said. So at a high level, the sort of scope for the work on the town centre strategy has been presented to the Policy and Resources Committee. Alongside a broad request for resources in order to be able to progress that work. Subject to some decisions due to be made tomorrow, then I hope that we'll have the funding for the first stages of that work. So two things particularly to highlight. Firstly, in the scoping of what we've presented already, the role of arts, culture and leisure is identified strongly as something that we need to A, value in terms of what we've got at the moment, but B, further enhance and develop for the town centre. That's for a variety of reasons, but one of them is that the economy is restructuring, and for our town centre to thrive going forward, then we need to ensure that there is a wide variety of things that will attract people to come, and the experience that they have means that they want to come back. And a key component of that is the arts, culture and leisure offer. So I think that this committee will have a large role to play in the shaping of that strategy going forward. So one of the things that we've committed to doing is to, assuming that we get the green light tomorrow, is to bring a report to each of the service committees over the course of the next couple of months to do that sort of introductory type conversation and dialogue about what the strategy should include. So I think we can be clear about what the vision and the objectives are. What we need to be clearer about is exactly how we're going to go about that. In our scoping of resources for the beginning of that strategy work, we have made some assumptions about the sorts of work that will need to be funded, and that does include some research and preparatory work for arts, culture and leisure. So I think this, apart from the economic development angle, which is important, the leisure part of your portfolio is just as important. And certainly the museum, the Hazlitt, and the open spaces that the town centre has will be key in that.
Well, when Alison starts mentioning some of those key points, I think it's just about every single aspect of what this committee is responsible for will be very significant in terms of any town centre thinking. You know, we are sport, we are leisure, we're the river, we're the shops, we're the high street, we're Lock Meadow, we're the bridge, we're the Archbishop's Palace, we're all of that. And these will all be very strong features for us to consider and think about. And that's why, as I mentioned to Councillor Nagy earlier, I'm reading into this that our work programme is going to be quite extensive. And if we do get the green light tomorrow at Policy and Resources, then there's going to be a lot of committee work for all of us. You were certainly a key part of that last week when you took the walk along the riverside, because I think the riverside is going to be a very significant factor in that. Councillor Forecast.
Thank you, Chairman. Just coming back to the topic of product range, really, I mean, I too would advocate perhaps expanding that, not just with T-shirts, but local businesses that tell the whole Maidstone story and that have that Maidstone sort of feel. But my main point really is, what sort of plans do the museum have with like modernising the purchasing experience within the gift shop, such as online or click and collect services?
Thank you. Catherine, I'm terribly sorry. Catherine Naymore, and I've forgotten her new married name, in the transformation, thank you, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I'm saying really. Catherine, in the Council's transformation team, has been looking for us over the last few months on a range of issues of how the museum might use particularly digital methods and technology to improve and streamline its resources in order to be more efficient. So one of the areas that she has been looking at is models for running the shop. So she's doing some exploratory work at the moment in a very exploratory, I should add, way around whether there are other organisations who may wish to run the museum shop, but also exploring options around, just as you say, online shopping or using a third party to fulfil orders and click and collect. The reason we don't do those things at the moment, and we have investigated them in the past, is around the website technology that we're using. So the last time we looked at this, the requirements for something like online shopping were such that they would be massively onerous for the museum to actually fulfill those orders. Obviously, the technology changes constantly and the opportunities change. So as part of what Catherine's doing, and with the appointment of the key person there who will be the visitor experience supervisor, we'll be looking in tandem again at what the museum does, who are we aiming it at, and how do we fulfill people's needs there.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Forecast?
Yeah, it does. Thank you for letting me know.
Thank you. I mean, I think we go back to the same old. Your actual conclusion is everything is under review. You're looking at. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I've got to keep this on because my mother has just been taken into hospital again. So, but I think we'll be wrapping up fairly soon anyway. Having got to that point, I'm going to read my suggested recommendations that I thought may come about as a result of this debate. And if you wish, we can take them collectively or we can take them separately. But Councillor Harper's already seconded one of those that I had proposed. But the proposed recommendations for this item 17 is that Maidstone's Museum's progress in achieving the medium-term financial strategy targets and structure be noted, more or less as the report. 2, that officers of the museum be thanked for their efforts over the last period of uncertain times, already proposed and seconded. That the current operations of the museum be reviewed against the Maidstone Museum 20-year plan and presented to the committee for feedback. So although to some extent we know that we're constantly reviewing, a specific way of presenting that we want some specifics out of what the review contains. Number 4, that officers bring a report to committee on the planned use of the 400,000 capital expenditure allocation, and pertinently to the way in which the museum is run in terms of trusts and organisations, that a report be brought forward on the museum's current governance arrangement, including options for simplification. Now, I've tried to explain that as I've gone down the route, but basically we're happy with the review process that's taking place at the moment. We thank the museum staff for doing it, but we're looking for more options and more reviews, and that we can use possibly £400,000 in doing so, and that we have simplifications for the governance of the museum. Does anybody have any comments to those recommendations, objections, addendums? I'm seeing nothing so far. Councillor Harper.
Yeah, I think I see no reason why we shouldn't look at all options, definitely. I think one of the things I'd like to try to build in is about bringing back the proposals in terms, I mean, we need to build in so that Victoria knows that the committee wants to look at the learning team, you know, the education team, which is currently funded by the Arts Council as part of it. Because if they cease their funding, which they will do probably at some point, the committee needs to be aware of what it might, you know, one, the implications, suppose, if the service stops, or secondly, you know, the need to potentially bid for money from the corporate pot to ensure that team continues. I'm just thinking, you know, within the wording you're saying, it's just so that when they come back prior to the budget making process, we've got all the information we need on all those types of issues which have come out of the report this evening.
You've just actually said it. Those issues can be within this wording, and I think that we are all minded towards that effect. So, in essence, I'm quite happy with the wording, but then, and I have worked it out in accordance with the chief executive as well. But Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. Given the work that you both have put into these recommendations, I see no reason to change them. Therefore, I'd like to propose the committee adopts those recommendations.
All in one block?
Indeed.
Do I have a seconder for that? I have several offers. I should take Councillor Harper. Thank you very much, because you made the original seconding for that proposal. Therefore, do you want me to read them out again? No? You'll get it in the minutes, certainly. So, as agreed, we have proposers, we have seconders to those 5 recommendations. Democratic Services already have them. Can I have a vote for? 2, 3, 7. No. Abstain? 1 abstention. Right. Well, I thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. And that seems to be the conclusion of the meeting. Thank you very much, officers. Thank you very much, members. Sorry, Councillor Newton still wants to say something.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know how many of you watched BBC Breakfast Time this morning. There is... Stone has actually formed the trenches that would have been in the Somme and places like that. And doing active reenactment for children, engaging the minute. The guy that runs it,